The myth of the Odyssey has been an inspiration for people for a very long time. Christopher Nolan is not the first person to be inspired by the character of Ulysses, and as with great myths and great stories, different people have taken and re-elaborated and reutilized the myth to tell their own stories in many different ways. Today, we're going to be talking about another time in which Ulysses made the headlines and changed the history of one of the forms of entertainment many years ago, and he changed it forever. Today, when you think of the Ulysses by James Joyce, maybe you are thinking, oh my God, that must be such a boring, book to read, or maybe you've read it at school and you think, oh my God, that sounds so boring. Just because when we think about, the classics of literature, you're not really thinking of something which is daring or edgy, especially if it was written like almost 100 years ago, right? More than 100 years ago, actually. So we have to always take things into context, though, and go back in time sometimes to imagine ourselves there and to really understand how groundbreaking something could be. And as today, everyone's talking about, the Odyssey, which has the main character as Ulysses, something similar was happening a long time ago when this book came out, because this book was like no other book. I talked with an expert recently about this subject matter who's actually writing a book about another book which was written by James Joyce. Hi, Stephen. So Stephen was telling me that this book, the reason why it is so groundbreaking is that before this book, people were basically writing in Victorian style. So in a very kind of florid, kind of almost decorative manner. Okay, can you say decorative about how someone writes? Well, I'm going to say it. From this moment onwards, he just changes the way he's using language, okay? One of the most important things that happens during this book is that we have the stream of consciousness style. So basically, you are reading what's going on inside the brain of the character like a full stream of consciousness situation, okay? So for example, the last chapter of the book is just like this whole major interior monologue inside the brain of Molly, okay? So the book is, well, first of all, let's talk a little bit about James Joyce. So James Joyce is actually Irish. He's from Ireland, but he spends most of his time around Europe, and he goes around, he teaches English. He's always kind of poor. He lives quite a difficult life, and he has a wife that loves him dearly. They love each other very, very much, and they travel together, and she kind of sticks next to him throughout all of his difficult life. Very, very attached to each other. So much so, actually, that the day in which Ulysses is set, because Ulysses, the book, is set in one day. So it's like literally 18 chapters of one day. Okay, and that day, which is Bloomsday, is actually the 16th of June of 1904, which is the day where James Joyce and his wife met. Okay, so that's how much he loves her, all right? He goes around writing this book in France. He actually writes it in the north of Italy a lot as well. He writes it in Switzerland. This isn't his first book. He also writes some other books before this one. This is he's already known, okay? This one is the big change, however, and what really makes him famous. In his second book, there had been, which was like portrait of the painter, portrait of the artist, something like this. There was a certain little piece where you could see him kind of manipulating language in a way, using language in a different way that was a little bit like a precursor to what he was going to do with the Ulysses. And you remember, this is a time in which there's great things happening in the arts and just very radical changes happening. We made a video about Gertrude Steiner, who, do you remember, she hated James Joyce because she was so jealous. She felt like had become famous for something that she had been trying to do, because she was also manipulating language a lot for her poetry. okay? Just not a lot of people cared. But he was very, very successful with his book. She will become successful later for a totally different book, remember? So we do have people that are playing a lot with language, playing a lot with the arts. We have, you know, Picasso during this period. And so it is something which is called for, I would like to say, the coming of a book like this one here. And he does get helped financially, so there are people that believe in him. So for example, there's a woman called Sylvia who publishes him. So she has a publishing company, and she's the one that basically finances this book and the publishing of this book. And he is tremendously educated and cultured, and that's why we have references to other important classics like the Odyssey, like we have a lot of Hamlet, which is cited inside the Ulysses by James Joyce as well. He is tremendously educated. He, like, every night before he goes to bed, he reads, like, I don't remember how many pages, like, oh, he reads 2 pages from 7 books. So he's like reading 7 books at a time. They didn't have Netflix at the time. So 2 books for each of 7, 2 pages for each of 7 books every night. That's what he's reading, okay? So imagine, he actually starts to lose his eyesight later on in life, and he will die on the operating table when they're operating him for his eyes, okay? So the book is actually, so it's set in Ireland. It's set on this day, this one day, and it follows the life of 3 people whose lives interconnect, okay? Everything, and there's many, and basically each chapter can be assigned to a chapter in the Odyssey. So it is a very, like, the reason why he calls it Ulysses, there's literally no one called Ulysses in the book, is because he's trying to make it clear, he's kind of planting a seed of like how you should read this book to the reader, because this book is based on the Odyssey, but in a way which is totally also not based on the Odyssey, if you see what I mean. So even the fact that the Odyssey develops throughout, 20 years, where is, not 20 years, how many years was it in the Odyssey? I can't remember. Ulysses was on his way back for a very long time. 20 years, it was the whole time that he was away from home. So I think it was like 13 years. I don't remember. We should ask Christopher Nolan. But he was away for all those years, and each chapter of the Odyssey can be connected to a chapter of the Ulysses. And yeah, the point is that in the Odyssey, he's away for all this long time and he's doing all this heroic shit, but in the Ulysses, it's just one day, and it's everyday things which are happening. So he's trying to create this parallel between everyday things which a regular human being does and the heroic things of myth. So he's trying to create this parallel and this connection between them, which I think is amazing. Okay, so for example, during the book, at one point, one character goes to visit a cemetery, and that is the chapter in the Odyssey where Ulysses goes into Hades. Okay, so because that's what myth is for. Myth is for us to use in everyday life, right? So this connection, there's a reason why he's creating this connection. And then there's characters that he takes. Everything is symbolic. Everything is very, very strongly symbolic in the book, okay? So for example, do you know how there's the Cyclops in the Odyssey? So there's this character which is this guy in a pub, which has got these very narrow-minded views. He's very conservative and very narrow-minded Irishman, and so he almost has this tunnel vision, and so he is the Cyclops, okay? Now, the characters in the book are these 3 characters, which are Leopold, Daedalus, and Molly. Molly is based on Penelope, although in this version she does actually cheat on her husband, although they do reunite at the end and they are happy again. Leopold is actually Ulysses, and he is the one which is sometimes confronted with different situations that he just has to overcome in a certain way. And he is also the one that has lost his son. So in this book, he loses his son and he's going through this grief, okay? And so his heroism is in overcoming this grief, basically. Then there's Daedalus, which is looking for a father figure, basically. He's researching, he's kind of lost his father, which is, it's a parallel also with Joyce's life, because James Joyce has a difficult relationship with his father. And in fact, Daedalus in the book is who he thinks of himself in or as. Apparently in all of his books, there's someone who is actually representing the author himself. And I thought it interesting that Ulysses is not, the guy that represents Ulysses is not the guy that represents the author in this book. So Daedalus is looking for a father figure, so there's some parallels with Hamlet here. And finally, when he meets up with Leopold, they have this, they kind of complete each other's needs in the sense that there's a father who's missing a son and a son who's looking for a father figure, right? And then finally, at the end of the book, Leopold goes home to his wife, Molly, with which he reconnects. And then there's that really long monologue. There are other interesting, well, there's many interesting parts of the book. And one of them which stands out to me is like when they go and visit, there's one of the men that lives in the house with Daedalus. Daedalus lives in this tower with this like medical student. And this medical student, when they go to the place where he's working, there's the start of the chapter is written in Old English, and then slowly the kind of English which is used in the chapter develops to get to modern English, and that is representing the development of the child which is growing in the womb, okay, which I thought was fascinating. And it's something also similar to that kind of what he did in the other book which he wrote, which was a precursor to this one in the way he manipulated language, okay. And so yeah, he does these kind of interesting things which obviously make it sometimes difficult for people to read it today, and in general to read it without an explanation. But it is still a book which kind of breaks entirely with anything that was written before it, and makes it in a way more readable to the modern reader than things which were so obviously from a different era, even though they were written at the same time as Ulysses. So I thought you would like to know a little bit more about this book, and just think about how it's interesting that this character, Ulysses, has been so influential on human beings forever, and that often when people think, like the human being thinks of themselves and of how they want to change themselves, or of themselves and their position in society and in relation to the rest of the world, often we want to use Ulysses as an instrument to tell that story. And this is literally what myths are for, which brings me back to what I said the other day, like, don't come for Christopher Nolan for not following the written myth word by word, because that's not what myths are for. Myths are for being changed, manipulated and transformed, and to tell a different story every time, with some common elements, but yes, that's literally what myths are for. So let me know what you thought about this video and what other videos you'd like me to talk about, and remember to subscribe. See you next time.